Good morning, Senator Blunt. How are you?
Good morning. How are you, Tom?
Well, very good. Now, listen, we have a quandary on our hands. Every Friday we eat in the studio, and tomorrow we're going to have bacon from Jennings Premium Bacon. Now, that sounds fine, right?
I assume you're asking the governor and the senator to come and have bacon with you? Is that the plan for tomorrow?
I think that'd be a grand plan. The dilemma involves next Friday and a barbecue taking place here at Zimmer Radio. You're going to have to get invited to that, too. I'll go into that later, as things have been out of control in the last 2 minutes in the studio. Good morning. Seriously, Senator, how are you?
Morning. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing fine. Listen, I have a couple of things I want to hit you on, and I feel like they're poignant. One being, last week, President Barack Obama visited several different places across America to talk about economics. He's talking about the economy. He did so in Warrensburg, Missouri. And I found it very interesting, your response to this Democratic president. You said, actually, you didn't disagree with everything he was saying, just his timeliness of bringing it up and then dropping it again. Explain that in more detail, if you would, please.
I think what I said, Tom, was when the president is talking about private sector jobs, that's when he's talking about the right thing. Now, I'm really not sure at the end of that long speech in both of those places, he really had much to say that would encourage private sector jobs. But this is about the 18th time now the president has pivoted back to jobs. And then the very next week, he goes to more regulation, higher taxes, higher utility bills, all of which have nothing to do with, and in fact, all of which become real obstacles to private sector jobs. I think what I said was that, like, even the stopped clock is right twice a day, and when the president says we ought to be focused on jobs, that's absolutely right, though I'm not sure he's ever really been focused on private sector jobs, which should be the number one domestic priority in the country today and should have been for the last 4.5 years.
Over the last day or two, a lot of work going on in Washington. Senate voted to approve one of President Barack Obama's nominees. Took one senator to switch her vote, another to fly back from North Dakota. After a roll call that stretched into the evening, it has been a few weeks going on. Final approval to a nomination for Todd Jones, Obama's pick to head the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, generally, I think that unlike the court picks that last for a lifetime, and I am very reluctant to put people on the court just because the president says they should be on the court. But unlike those picks, jobs that are going to last as long as he's president or about the same time, I think generally, unless there's something wrong with the nominee, there's a reason to say the president got elected president. I didn't, and I can't find anything wrong with this person except I don't like his policies, and of course I don't like the president's policies generally, so that's not the overwhelming obstacle. But I didn't vote to go forward with this nomination yesterday because this person, there's still an investigation going on about a whistleblower thing that involves him as the U.S. attorney in Minnesota, and I think other questions have never been answered, like the Fast and Furious operation that both Justice and Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms were involved in. So I thought this was, and there have been a number of exceptions lately. Gina McCarthy, I thought, was an exception. I thought the new Secretary of Labor was an exception. Just horrendously poor records that they take to these jobs, and I thought this person was the same, but nothing really changes. He's been the acting director for a number of years now, so his final confirmation won't head the government in any kind of a different direction. But I thought Senator Grassley particularly kept saying, let's wait until we get the answers to these ongoing investigations before we make a final decision here. And I think Senator Grassley was exactly right, and I didn't vote to go forward with this nomination.
Eagle News Time 721, Senator Blunt on the phone with us, and News Director Brad Tornago.
Thanks again for joining us, Senator. I wanted to ask you about some student loan legislation that you co-sponsored in the Senate, and the House apparently agreed with that, passed it, and it's going to be a 3.9% interest rate for undergrads, a little higher for grad students, but that could rise, that rate, as the economy picks up. Why do you think it was a good idea to tie this to the market instead of just locking in one set number?
Well, you do lock in one set number for as long as that student or that family has that particular portion of their loan. But the only way the cost goes up to the student is if the cost goes up to the taxpayer to get the money. You know, somebody has to get the money to give to the student. And in this case, the 10-year note becomes the basis, and then you add a little bit onto that for the administration of the program, your estimation of people who won't pay those loans back, so that ultimately students get a lot of help here and their families get a lot of help, but in a way that should basically be fair to the taxpayers as well. I thought the big difference in the bill I voted against and was pleased to be against was that it would have set the interest rate at 3.4% for 40% of the families that get these loans, but it would have let the interest rate at 6.8% for the 60% that don't have a subsidized loan. They're still middle-class families that need help sending their kids to school. I thought they were being treated unfairly in the old system, and now everybody has the same interest rate. Some families still get the subsidized loan, which means that the interest rate is not charged during the years you're in school. That's where taxpayers help a family that doesn't have the resources that the next family might have. So I think it's it's a permanent solution. We're no longer going to have this every summer. We worry about as families, and 257,000 Missouri families will get these loans between now and the time school starts. They now know what the interest rate is going to be on this part of their loan until the day it's paid off. That 3.8% or so, you mentioned 3.9%, that will always be the interest rate on that part of the loan unless for some highly unlikely reason it goes down, and then you could consolidate your loans at the new lower rate.
You're also co-sponsoring a proposal that would defund ObamaCare. This has not been an issue in terms of passing this out of the House. This has already happened a few times, in fact, but the Democrats do control the Senate. How likely is it that you guys would be able to push through this proposal?
You know, probably not very likely. The Democrats control the Senate, and the president got reelected, and at the end of the day, 67 senators would have to agree with two-thirds of the House to override the virtually certain president's veto. Clearly, the problem I've had with the start with the president's health care plan is I just don't think it'll work. I think it is built on faulty premises, and more they're acting like they don't think it'll work. They keep postponing parts of it till after the next election. Believe me, Tom, I'm confident if they thought that people were really going to like this once they saw how it worked, they wouldn't be putting it off until after the next election. They'd be trying to do everything they to get it in place before the next election. But, you know, before, no rules and regulations effectively were issued before the 2012 election, and within 60 days, there are 22,000 pages of rules and regulations that come out. There's a reason that the administration didn't want voters to see those before Election Day. And now if you read the president's advocates out there in the press and other places say, this is brilliant, not letting the employer requirement go in until after the 2014 elections. The health care bill has always been more about being a political issue than it was a health care plan that will really work. And I'd like to have enough senators that we could at least put the bill on the president's desk that says let's not go forward with this, and let him veto it and have that fight. But you're right. I'm not in the majority in the Senate. The President of the United States is totally committed to this plan, no matter how bad it might turn out to be. But at the same time, I'm still staking out my position that this won't work. Let's do things that will make the current healthcare system work better instead of just sit here and watch the current healthcare system deteriorate as people look at the president's healthcare plan and say, I don't want to be part of this new system. And that's happening with doctors and insurance companies and lots of things are going away.
You know, Roy, you mentioned that some of the president's advocates have said that it was a brilliant move to do this. Yeah, maybe not very morally upstanding, but could be brilliant, I guess. I got to tell you, the administration saying that Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, that it is working. They say that when it fits the support they need for whatever the hell they're trying to sell at that moment, and then they'll come back in the same conversation and say that we can't gauge it yet because it's not implemented yet. They go back and forth on this thing. They talk about it's working with the tiny little pieces that have started and then delaying the rest, some of the major components until after the elections. I mean, it's so underhanded and it's so two-faced, and it must be frustrating to you on the Hill.
It's very frustrating to me, and it's the whole truth from the very start. This has been part of this process. There was part of the original bill that was signed, part of the law called the Class Act for Long-Term Care. I said at the time, there's no way this just will not work. And oh no, they said it'll work. Not only will it work, it'll be one of the big pay-fors in this plan. But a year and a half ago, Secretary Sebelius said, this just really won't work, so we're not even going to try to do the Class Act. And all kinds of exemptions. Now the labor unions who were supportive of this, from the Teamsters on down, have written letters in the last month that says, this is going to ruin our health care. Let's do away with this. The people who are looking at this understand it won't work. And you're exactly right. This whole it's working, and then when you find something that's for sure and obviously not working, they say, well, it's not really implemented yet. And the truthfulness of this debate on the side of the advocates has not been very strong.
Obama administration, both spokesperson Jay Carney and President Obama himself using phrases like phony scandals recently. We only have about 90 seconds left, but this phony scandal thing, which would include us investigating the NSA, and senators are digging into that this week. How did that sit with you, hearing that scandals in Washington were phony?
Oh, it's outrageous. The Benghazi response by the administration, clearly not a scandal. This was not about some movie that was about to come out. Everybody that knew, always known, this was clearly a terror attack. 2 of the 4 people died 7 hours after the first 2 people died, and the government did nothing to prevent it, appears to have done nothing to investigate it. This thing this week where CNN can find the number 1 suspect, but the FBI can't, is outrageous. No question that the IRS is a much bigger issue than Obama wants people to think it is, and there's no question that conservative groups, constitutional groups, patriot groups, people that advocated foreign policy positions different than the president's, pro-Israel groups, all were in for special scrutiny, and it didn't happen in Cincinnati, Ohio. It happened in Washington, D.C.
We sure appreciate your time this morning, and there's a lot to talk about in a brief 15-minute span, but that invitation for bacon is still out there for tomorrow. Just to let you know that.
I'll see how Governor Christie and Senator Paul respond to theirs, and if they both show up, I'll try my best to be there.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
United States Senator Roy Blunt joining us this morning, 7:30.